Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. This is going to be a special edition. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, not usual for the podcast. And joining us for the first time are Elizabeth Glass, Lisa Miron for her second time, Jana Ben-Nun, and Steven Ben-Nun. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So glad to be here. Thank you.
So maybe to start, Lisa, you've been on the podcast before, but perhaps real quick, if we could have everyone introduce themselves briefly, because some of you are likely new to my audience, and then give us your best websites. And maybe, Lisa, you can start, and then Elizabeth, Jana, and Steven.
Okay, yeah, so everybody, I'm on Substack at Lawyer Lisa. That was just my nickname. Everybody had a Lisa friend, so I was Lawyer Lisa. I've been a lawyer for 26 years. I have an environmental science degree, a minor in chemistry, a bachelor of laws, a master of laws. I sued the government in the first SARS case, and some other interesting legal cases that involve the government. I went in-house and I became more aware of what was going on in around 2022. God gave me an accident, and that kept me in bed, and I was able to do a lot of research during that time. I'm a mother of 4. I wrote World on Mute, and I encourage you to grab it. We've discussed it before, and I think it actually has a lot of bearing on this topic that we're going to be discussing today, because I was describing a 1B system of courts that I thought was going to replace our courts. And that's it for me. You can find me at lawyerlisa.substack.com. Get my book on Amazon.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Glass. I'm a writer, mom, teacher, and activist. You can find me on elizabethglass.org, and there's links there to my social media. And in 2019, the 2 youngest of my 4 kids were kicked out of school because of New York's compulsory vaccination law. And so I became an activist and eventually a grassroots political candidate. And I viewed the compulsory vaccination law as an assault on our kids. And so I endeavored to find out who was behind it. So also I'm a Reformed Jew. I had a bat mitzvah in a Reformed synagogue in the 80s. So I'm in New York too. So.
Okay.
Hi.
Go ahead.
So it's us, I guess, Steve and Jana, and I will speak with Steve because it's, what we do it together. So, but we are in ministry for the last 10 years, at least minimum 10 years. And about 7 years ago, we came out of Zionist Christianity. We lived in Israel for a little bit, and we saw things. Well, Steve lived there before he married me, but then when we got married, we moved to Israel, and we saw certain things that, as we were also Christians, so we kind of saw that things are not as nice as they are as things have been told to us. So we started research and wanting to go back to original roots of our Jewishness. We opened up Talmud, Zohar. And when we saw things in Talmud and the Zohar, we were shocked to see certain things in there. Like, we were not aware. And Steve was Jewish, but he still wasn't aware fully of what is inside of this book. So we, of course, compared it with Christianity and with all that picture that's being told about Israel. We decided to move out of Israel at that point, and we lived in Prague, Czech Republic, in my country. And then we moved back to United States eventually. We have 2 children. It's Ethan and Ariella. And right now we are just continuing our ministry with a focus of getting people out of Zionism and Zionist Christianity. And you can find me on Substack. It's Jana Sutova, SUTOOVA.substack.com, where I focus on Noahide Laws and Zionist Christianity. And you can find Steve on IsraeliNewsLive.org And he's also on Patreon, and we have a YouTube channel, Israeli News Live YouTube channel. So can you add something to that?
I think you did pretty good already.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, all right, yeah, and I followed all of your stuff, and the links will be in the description. And maybe just to start, before getting to Noahide, if I could get from everyone real quick their sort of big picture 2-minute take as to what you think is going on globally, sort of your interpretation of the New World Order and the Great Reset Plan. And I'll start with an article, Jana, that you just shared on X recently, which I reposted, which basically sums up my view. It was an article about the Sky Kings, I think, them building this sort of orbital authority. And in that article, they say, quote, "We are watching a one world government being assembled in real time while the world is kept distracted with politics, rhetoric, and division," end quote. And so my reading is that Bible prophecy is coming into being. We no longer effectively have nations, nor politicians, nor governments. They're being merged into these regional units like the European Union, which form the basis for this world federation, the network of global governments, and everything is being digitized into a global algocracy or technocracy, which will be the control and behavior enforcement mechanism. And that's my sort of quick take at your guys' thoughts.
Well, I actually think you're right. We're looking at everybody being entered into an AI operating system where we're becoming our data. So we have good data, bad data. In the book, I talked a bit about the idea that the operating system is the smart city, and that you're entered into it as a widget. And your data is being mined by AI. People think AI is Grok. People think AI is, ChatGPT, but AI actually is the system of governance. I think that is possibly also the Antichrist order that tends to think they're going to bring on their Antichrist, or they're positioning people to become their Antichrist. And I think there is a lot of Bible prophecy, not just biblical prophecy, but you're also seeing Muslims report that they believe their end times are approaching. And which is interesting on that is that they have a hadith that says some of their people will escape the fires of hell by fighting alongside Jesus when he returns. And so you see this idea of they're thinking this time is upon us. And then didn't Peter Thiel just say, hey, if you guys don't adopt AI in our systems and Palantir and whatnot, that'll bring on the Antichrist faster. So if you don't cooperate, so which is, it's an interesting statement because it shows the tech bros also have their own end time prophecy. I'll be talking about Bill C9, but I think it's our Noahide Law. And I think that that's going to be important to unpack as part of the fit in the end times. Because I also had a rabbi I just posted about who thinks Rabbi Schneerson is going to resurrect in 2026 as the Messiah, which I think, as their Messiah, which I think is also an interesting end times, because that means that 2026 for a certain Jewish rabbis, actually, they too think we're very close. So there's a lot of discussion to take place today.
Elizabeth, agree, disagree? Your thoughts?
Oh yeah, I agree. In some respects, it's quite simple what's happening. I mean, I think they're moving towards a one world government with one world military, religion, court system, and it's very problematic. And we can see just from what happened with COVID, and it's very problematic. And I kind of came into it from the vaccine issue, and I learned a lot coming from that perspective. And so it's just been like COVID was just like a multi-pronged attack on the world's population. It wasn't just the virus, it was the shot. And also just the way that all the institutions and governments work together to implement that plan. And as I was learning about what was happening, I came across certain educators, and that's how I met Jana and Steven. And they've been very instrumental in me learning. And as a Jew, coming to terms with some very, very painful things. It's been, when you're Jewish and you see what's happening, and you come to terms with these things, it's almost an attack on who you are as a person. But I will say, coming to terms with that has been freeing for me. Also, finding resources like Henry Mackau and Ron Unz, who are Jewish, was for me very helpful. And I've never heard them speak about the Noahide Laws. So I think for me, being Jewish, talking about them, it's important because Jewish people, and Jana can talk about this, just the way Jews are viewed by the people in control. They have a lot of power to impact change and kind of redirect the route this is going. So that's why I'm speaking out. I don't actually have as much time. Macau and Unz and other writer activists have a lot more time to devote because of my personal life. I'm not a full-time activist anymore, so that's another thing I should add. So
Yeah,
but this is rolling out in Canada, so that's why I'm speaking out now. So
I've had Ron has been on the podcast, and he's been a sponsor for a couple of months related to the COVID stuff. And I've interviewed Henry as well on my old TNT program. I think he's, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere down here in Mexico where I am. And Jana and Steven, your quick thoughts on the New World Order project?
You want to go first? Go ahead.
Okay, that's hard to we look at each other all the time who is talking first. So, but anyway, yes, we are at a time when the world is coming together in all areas of life, and Noahide laws are scheduled to be the world religion, and people don't know it because they have been dressed under this universal language, universal ethics, justice. These are those pretty words that cover up Noahide laws. However, Chabad organization has been very active, speaking very frankly and clearly to their audiences about Noahide laws, and they name them just like it is, Noahide laws. We know that Vatican, so religion, as far as Christianity as a corporation or Christianity as a institution, okay, have signed up on Noahide laws already. Vatican did. And under the Vatican came World Council of Churches. They kind of went back to Mama Rome. And so they, as a one unit, signed up onto Noahide laws. So did the United Nations, and they have a different charters, even like rainforest or save the earth, green ideas. It's all Noahide laws dressed in totally different language. So yes, we are very well aware of what's coming, and it's going to be one world court system with international court that will be transferred to Jerusalem because Jews want to fulfill the scripture. I think it's in Isaiah where it says that law shall, or Zechariah, now I don't know which one. I'm always wrong about where the scripture is in the Bible. So I have to always look it up. And so anyway, where it says that the law shall come out of Jerusalem. You're familiar with that scripture? If you are, so that's what they're working on. They want the law to come out of Jerusalem, and they're going to define what the law actually is. So that's what's going on. And Steve, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I'm actually just doing a little bit of work on this as well at the same time. When I look at this, I remember one thing that's very commonly stated amongst the Chabad, and I like to separate it too, because not all Jewish people even have a clue of really what's going on, but because I also was in the Chabad organization for many years, I know a lot more about it and how it works, how they think, politically minded, etc. And the saying that they like to say to Christians when they're talking about them becoming good Noahides, is to have a place as a righteous Gentile in the world to come. I think that's kind of interesting. It kind of reminds me of the Jehovah's Witness organization as well. They keep talking about their world to come. So sadly, they may end up fitting in really well with that. And then I also look at the fact that the Silk Road Initiative, the BRICS nations, every bit of this is actually part of what they're preparing. When I say what they're preparing, I used to be in business. I owned a trucking company for 25 years. So that's when I was more active with the Chabad organization, and I knew a lot of very wealthy Jewish business owners. And I can tell you back in the 90s, we were talking about how that we were moving manufacturing jobs, things like that, all over to China. And the purpose was because we knew the economy here was not going to stay forever. And so they were building up China, getting it ready. And even friends of mine in Israel were saying to me that China would be the next world superpower. So everything is being set up, staged, and made ready for a new world order. They want to collapse the global economy here as well. And now Israel is very actively trying to save face after the Charlie assassination and the Gaza war, where they just genociding the people in Gaza. So they're trying to as quickly as they can, get the Zionist ministers back on their side. So they brought 1,000 of them over there to Israel to re-educate them to get this whole thing moving again.
And if I can just say one more thing, because Elizabeth said that what COVID has started and how COVID happened, and that's when her awakening happened. A lot of people actually came to awakening at the COVID time. So it's a bad thing that COVID happened, but it's a good thing too, because a lot of people are waking up since then, right? But it wasn't just a chance that this happened. It comes from the Kabbalah tree, and at top, very top of the Kabbalah tree is called Corona, which is a crown. Okay, so that was like a sign to the world that we started. Like now, from that point on, it's going to go rapidly. Like they're getting ready. Infrastructure is completely almost done. There is few more things to do, and they're going to create crisis of global proportions that have never happened yet before. I assume it's going to be economic collapse all over the world. And then a new beast system or a new system will be ready to come in. And that's when they're going to put in even a new world religion. And when you spoke about AI, I do believe that it's going to be an AI messiah. And when you spoke about a resurrection of Schneerson, that's a very interesting idea, because they call him God Rebbe. I have a video where they call him that. Their children in the yeshivas are greeting invisible rabbi every morning. And they have him as a Messiah, and 75% of Chabadniks do not believe he died. Okay, so how are they going to resurrect him? Maybe they have technology, all kinds of technologies, and they're going to resurrect that Rebbe, and they will say, oh, here he is. I don't know. This is a speculation, pure conjecture on my part, but it's an interesting idea.
I think we'll have to, explain the Noahides from a very basic premise to people, right? Because people are familiar with the concept of Sharia law, for instance, but we have a lot of, perhaps because some of us have been writing or researching in this area or experiencing this area, we have to start like right from the very basics. What are the 7 Noahide laws? Why do we know that they're entered into law in most states around the world, the UN, etc.? So show people that, because for me as a Christian, I find it very startling to discover this. I went to law school, so good portion of the people that I was close with were Jewish. It just happened to work out that way, and so I would say most of them too would be very surprised. So I think we have to we're already at letter 7 or 8, or G or H or whatever. We have to back it up and say, what are the 7 Noahide laws? What do they say? How did they enter into our law? As in the U.S., it's the supreme law of the land. So saying that it's entered as the supreme law of the land seems to displace even the Constitution.
Absolutely. Yes.
Can I say something really quickly? I did the video called "What Are the Noahide Laws and Why is President Trump's doctor promoting them. Just for people who are Jewish who might be watching this, because it was about, I was very pro at the time. I was very just before I made it, I was pro-Israel, and it was about my awakening and explaining what the Noahide laws are. Although Jana and Steven are the experts on the history of it, so I'll let her explain it. But if there's Jewish people who are watching, they might find that video interesting. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's great.
And I sent you I sent you a link to that video.
Yeah, I'll include that in the description. But yeah, if you guys could just really quick run those down, because often on their face when you read the Noahide laws, they seem like who would disagree with that, right?
Right.
Here's the law itself. I printed it out. So,
and also, I highly recommend again Jana's Substack. Your most recent piece from a few days ago. You say the quiet rise of a Noahide world order, and you're saying it may already be too late. But you mentioned how they brought in United Religions Initiative. The UN's created the Faith for Earth Initiative, Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. So they're just kind of like putting out a lot of makeup, so to speak, on that. So if anyone could just really quickly give us a crash course 101 on these 7 Noahide laws.
Sure. So let's quickly talk. I will tell you all basics real quick, and then you can talk all about it. But yes, they sound just like 10 commandments, very similar. So they're designed so when Christians hear them, they do not protest because Christians believe all these things. They're in the basic 7 Noahide laws, but you have to understand that's not really 7. That's a deception. These are just big categories of 7, and then there is these sub-laws, right? Each category has several sub-laws. So we would say it's over 100 laws that are made up by rabbis in their heads. And they're putting Gentile world, all the nations, under all kinds of rules and regulations, and they're not going to be an easy thing to fulfill, very difficult. So when you just hear Noahide laws in its basics, you will say, what's wrong with this? This is normal. This is good. This is what we need. That's what the world needs. We don't want wars. We don't want murders. We don't want all that. So most people who do not research and don't understand, they will just go along with it. So they're from the Talmud. So you have to understand they're not biblical. They are from the sacred books of Jewish people, which is Talmud. And they're found in a book of Sanhedrin, more specifically. And 56a through 60 is the chapters that speak about Noahide laws, executions, for those who do not fulfill Noahide laws or break only one of them. It's all execution by decapitation, by the way. So first Noahide law in the Talmud says that you have to establish courts of justice. Now, I want to point out that when rabbis give lectures on Noahide laws to the Gentiles, they don't say that as a first law. They will say, you will not have idols. Idolatry, no idolatry. So why did they flip it? They brought the courts of justice that's first listed in Talmud down as the very last law. That's because when the courts of justice is the first law, that establishes this is not really it's universal ethics, but it's a legal system. We are talking here about legal system, okay? It's not universal ethics. So here we go. No idolatry, no murder, okay? No stealing, prohibited certain sexual relations, do not eat meat from living animal, do not eat a limb of a living animal, do not blaspheme, and then establish courts of justice. So these are the 7 laws. So when you hear those laws, They're very similar to Ten Commandments, although they miss few things like honor your father and your mother and stuff like that, right? So what is the problem here? Problem comes from two things, that there are sub-laws under each category, and number two, who has the power of interpretation of these laws? Because when somebody gives you laws, you need somebody who interprets them. Okay, who says what these laws mean? These laws mean something totally different to me as a Christian and a totally different to a person who belongs to Chabad organization and learns under rabbis in yeshiva. Okay. So, and I want to give you the example. First of all, these laws establish a two-tier system. Okay, it's not one people under God. It's two people under God. It's the Jews and non-Jews. So it's the first thing that comes is the separation of Jews and non-Jews. And Jews are looked at as a divine race, chosen race, with a higher quality or a divine soul within them. The Gentiles do not have a divine soul. They have a soul of animals. And the belief is that Gentiles have to be managed. They have to be told what to do, always teach them how to live moral life. And if they're not taught the Noahide laws, they're assumed to live in idolatry, to be murderers, to blaspheme. They're already assumed guilty. Okay? So number one law is no idolatry, and that's where the problem comes for Christians, because under this Noahide law, there are several prohibitions. And of course, in Christianity, we have several denominations, right? We have Catholics, they bow down to statutes. We have Protestants, they kind of got rid of statutes. So, of course, any kind of statue worship, that's idolatry. That's not allowed. But also under idolatry law, you cannot have a worship of a man or have a mediator between you and God. Okay, you can't create your own religion. You cannot worship Jesus Christ. And we know that Christians do worship Jesus. So automatically, Christianity is disqualified, okay, under first Noahide law, under idolatry. So Christians are idolaters, no matter what any rabbi tells you at this time. At this time, there are some rabbis, yes.
I don't want to mess you up on that.
No.
Thing that's important is under not profaning God's name. Under the Chabad definition is also do not profane God's name, God's oneness in any way. And that's where the part about Jesus becomes an issue there because of the Trinity.
Yeah, Trinity too, okay. Yes.
So, go ahead.
Right. So, under, well, I don't know where I was. So I have this problem.
Just finish that part up. That's the reason I tried to catch you at that part.
No, thank you. Thank you, Steve. So I will tell you what the problem is, for example, on the do not blaspheme law, what the sub-law is. There's several, okay, but I will tell you one very important one. Under the Judaic law, rabbis have a position of basically God on earth. That's kind of strange because they tell you that you cannot have Jesus, but then they put themselves on the same stool, okay? They are the Jesus themselves. So basically, if you're a Christian, or if you're even not Christian, if you're any other religion, and you do not agree with a rabbi or debate a rabbi, or do not obey the rabbi, this is already considered blasphemy. Because under Judaic law, rabbi has a position given to him by God on earth to teach and to interpret those laws. So if you are in any disagreement and you're not automatically in line with it, you already are considered blasphemer. So there we go. Just me debating now or telling you that I don't agree with those laws, the head would be cut off, right? Another one, do not steal. Let me give you an example here. you will see how unequal the laws are for Jews and non-Jews. The Jew can steal from a Gentile any amount. It's not allowed, but he can. All he has to do is repair the problem, meaning give it back, and maybe with little interest or something, if he's brought to the court, right? But if a Gentile steals anything from a Jew or a fellow Gentile, he has to die by decapitation. And the stolen object can be worth of a penny or less, and punishment is already execution. So you wonder, how uneven and unequal these laws are. Now, it gets even worse when we come to sexual laws, because the adultery, only women are executed. And Elizabeth can tell you more about that one, because she went to a certain Catholic church where they were actually teaching those laws. Remember, Elizabeth? And you were talking about adultery. Can you tell us about that?
Right. I believe it was the first time that the Noahide Laws were introduced in the Catholic Church in the United States. It was this January 2025. And so I went and I was curious to see what they were going to talk about. And it was, on Long Island, where I'm originally from, not far from where I was born. And I just was there to listen and maybe ask some questions. And it was so sad because there were the sweetest Catholic, mostly like nice Catholic ladies who were so saddened to hear about all this anti-Semitism. They're good people. They're nice Catholic ladies. But the guy who was teaching the class, I would imagine he was a 21st degree Freemason, but I can't prove that. But there was something really creepy about him. But anyway, he was he was introducing the laws, and probably one of the more gentle ones, relatively speaking, is about adultery, because of course everyone doesn't like adultery. But he said that the punishment was capital punishment. And I was kind of trying to nudge the audience along, because Long Island people are very nice. They're polite. There was kind of like a jovial atmosphere. And even when I asked the question, it was kind of in a joking way. I said, just a question, is the laws just for women? And of course, from Jana, I know that it is. And men, it depends on certain circumstances. So he kind of dodged the question, but he did not disagree with me. So I could tell that there were there's an uncomfortable silence in the room. So, and
Right.
that whole portion of their internet of that Catholic church on Long Island has been scrubbed from the internet. I couldn't find it. So.
Wow. Yeah. Well, but another thing is that if under these particular laws, sexual laws, if a man rapes a woman, if it's a Gentile man that rapes Gentile woman, he is executed. But if he rapes a Jewish woman, he's executed. But if a Jewish man rapes Gentile woman, he's not executed. She's executed. So, and it's a kind of strange thing how this works, because if a Jewish man rapes a Gentile woman, what comes into the halakha immediately is law for animals and bestiality laws, meaning that if a Jewish man sleeps with a female animal, under the halakha, which is Jewish law, the animal has to die because it caused the Jewish man to lust the animal. So when Jewish man rapes a Gentile woman, she's considered an animal. So they don't execute the Jewish man, they execute the woman. And in a Talmud, it says, even if the woman or a girl is 3 years old. So it basically, when you read these sub-laws, this is when you find out the whole soul of the Noahide law, what it really truly is. And that's what's shocking. And I think that this is where people need education, because I cannot understand why would anybody agree with Noahide laws if you are well educated about the sub laws. And even when it comes to things that Christians disagree with, like let's say we don't like adultery as Christians, that's not allowed, right? But would we actually go and decapitate someone for this? No, we have grace. All right, you repent and you put your life back together. Come back to Christ, okay? And clean up your life. This is our approach, not decapitation. So this whole capital crimes for everything. And then one thing that I think you will understand, Liz, is that inequality in the law, when it says that you have to have, Lisa, I'm sorry, when you have to have, for Gentiles, one judge is enough, okay? One witness is enough. Mm-hmm. Circumstantial evidence is enough, okay, to put a Gentile to death. For Jews, you have to have, for certain crimes, 3 witnesses. For other crimes, for capital crimes, 23, you have to have 3 witnesses and 2 or 3 judges. And for capital crime, for Jews, you have to have 23 judges. So there is no safety guard for Gentiles at all. One judge, one witness, circumstantial evidence, and they don't have to be warned up front. The Jews have to be warned up front. So it's almost impossible to bring a Jew to a court and execute him. But it's very, very easy to bring Gentile to court and execute him. They also don't believe in any waiting, too. It's the same day. Execution the same day, because under Noahide law, there is no prisons, see. They're going to sell it, won't need any prisons because the world is going to be so great. There is no prison. There will be very swift executions. So can you imagine waking up to that kind of a world one day? It's absolutely horrifying. So I really believe that we have to educate Gentiles about all of this.
And as you said, I wasn't aware of the sub laws. So again, that's new to me. So I was aware of the preliminary, 7, and now that changes the game completely. And then maybe to get everyone's thoughts on how will the entire world accept this? How is this being brought into law? And I know, Lisa, you're looking at Canada. I'm here in Mexico. Like, just for example, how would Mexico? We do have a Jewish president, funnily enough. But just thoughts on how you see this being implemented. Or you already mentioned some supranational organizations like UN have implemented it. So it could come by way of.
Am I allowed to share?
Yeah, you can share.
Oh, sorry. So I had a little bit of a lull. So I'm just going to share my screen. Because it's one thing to say, well, we have Noahide laws and we don't really understand them, and we don't understand how they're going to be coming through to our countries. And in fact, they are entering already as the supreme law of the land. And there was a resolution back in 1991-92 of the 102nd Congress. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I want to make sure it's showing up. And so this entered the Noahide laws very vaguely into the laws of the United States of America. So it's not simply that we're talking about the concept of the Sanhedrin that was set down a long time ago, and that, this is what the rabbis thought in the 1400s or the year 1000, or this is something that is part of the United States of America, and I'm going to show the Canadian law that is being set down. And so it says that the basis of civilized society, and I'm just going to, I don't know if you see the tradition of ethics and principles. These values are the bedrock from the dawn of civilization, where they were known as the 7 Noahide laws. So you can see them here. And whereas without these ethical values, like we don't have the 7 Noahide laws, the principles and edifice of civilization stands in serious peril of returning to chaos. So it's Noahide or nothing, everybody. So, we're profoundly concerned with the weakening of the principles that have resulted in these crises. And so we have to not let this nation lose sight of their responsibility to transmit these ethical values from past generations of, let's see, how do I move this here? Of the future, whereas the Lubavitch movement has fostered and promoted these ethical values and principles throughout the world. And here we're talking about Rabbi Benjamin Mendel Schneerson. He's a leader and he's revered, and it's his birthday. So as a result of that, we are going to turn to education and charity and return the world to the moral and ethical values contained in the 7 Noahide laws. So you can see there's here within the language of the law, action verbs to return the world to ethical values contained in the 7 Noahide laws. It's reflected in the International Scroll of Honor signed by the President, the Senate of Representatives. And I know that Elizabeth has tracked it to every state. So it's definitely part of the law of the US. So we're not having a fanciful discussion about theoretical Talmudian application, to the citizens of the world. And so I started to look at this very sadly because I thought, oh, gee. So every president has been proclaiming the Education and Sharing Day, which is this, which came out of the resolution in 1991, which was President Bush. And so you have Obama doing it. You had Ronald Reagan allegedly doing it. Here's George Bush signing it.
Every president every president has signed it.
Every president has signed it. So this isn't, it's not a theoretical conversation. And then I tracked it to, you have this concept of the Noahide laws even at the UN. And this is the Institute of Noahide Code. And according to this NGO, that the Noahide law forms the basis of international law. So whatever you ever thought international law was, it is the Noahide laws. Okay, and they have an expertise, they say, in all kinds of different things, including indigenous, humanitarian affairs, advocacy, outreach, population, distribution, and internal migration, population structure. So can it have Christians? And then they are writing, their mission statement is that they write the Institute to a strategic alliance with United Nations post-2030 agenda to promote the codification into national legislation of the United Nations resolutions on culture, peace, environment, ethics, and social justice. The Institute of Noahide Code recruits parliamentarians from all United Nations member states who share this goal of implementing these United Nations resolutions into national legislation, they write the draft legislation. And I've been reading all the legislation coming into Canada, and I said, who's writing this demonic stuff? So here it is. Initiating workshops and conferences and creating alliance with religious leaders, media, academic leaders, business. How's this coming in? Very thoroughly. Business leaders, executives who supplement legislation by teaching, publicizing, putting it into practice, the ethics inherent in these United Nations resolutions. So it's like they see their road to the Noahide laws through the United Nations resolutions. They think the United Nations is a vehicle, but you also see here that they're drafting all the legislations. They're meeting with parliamentary sponsors, where they're meeting with the Department of Legal Affairs. So here they are preparing for the codification, legislation, and implementation of these, quote, global ethics, which they say are inscribed in contemporary society by the UN. So then they go on, this is all from their site, United Nations Secretary and an Annual Assembly on Legislation for Global Ethics to be held in the UN General Assembly to report and encourage further progress towards the goals. The Noahide Court, this is UN, NGO, the Noahide Code, which according to Hugo Grotius forms the basis of international law. The project of the Institute of the Noahide Code addresses the root causes which affect the development of peace and democracy worldwide. So I decided, okay, so it's not only law in the US. What does it actually mean for us? And I found this document following Wikipedia on the Noahide Laws, but not what they say. What I followed their links to their links. And so this is from the Laws of King and Wars, translated from the Rambam Mishtorah. And definitely everybody should take a look at this because it says, well, okay, they can, there's, and you're going to have to correct me, everybody, when I say something wrong, but there's a war of mitzvah. The war of mitzvah requires here that that they do this war. So there's a difference between a war of mitzvah and a discretionary war. This is essentially a plan that they say will bring on their Messiah, and what needs to be done. And within it, it tells you what the Noahide Laws. The punishment is decapitation. It's very clear Christianity is not compatible with the 7 Noahide Laws. And in further, it says that there's a requirement to extirpate the 7 nations. So those are 6 nations in the Middle East. And I don't remember which one. And then what they call Rome. And Rome is defined as everywhere the West is. Okay, not to leave any of them alive. I was so sad reading this, right? So how would you attack the 7 nations and Rome? So Rome is the UK, Rome is Europe, Rome is New Zealand, Rome is the US, Rome is Canada. Rome is what we're seeing. And to destroy the descendants of Amalek. Okay, and you can't forget their evil deeds and etc. And Israel was enjoined with these commandments. So this is how they're taking the Torah to create a plan and to use the religious identity. And I'm so very sad to say this, but erase the memory of Amalek. And in here it talks about extirpation, which is it's you and your kids and your kids' kids and everybody and everybody else since the dawn of time. And so this is their document. It has their emails on it, has their rabbi name on it. It was translated in 2012. And so the king has a right to execute a killer even when there's no clear proof against him or no warning, even if there was only one witness. So some of those things that you were talking about. The document says that the king acquires the money of anyone he executes. So there's this incentive. He has to do a war of mitzvah. So that's a mandatory war. So, and that means how they interpret a mandatory war is a war against the 7 nations. Okay, so it had those, in order to bring on the Messiah, you have to be warring against the 7 nations and against the Amalek. Okay, and any war to assuage Israel of a persecutor. So I'm so sad to be discussing this because I doubt any of my Jewish friends and would understand how difficult it is that there is a sect that brings this on, that's in the UN, that is part of Chabad, that is writing our laws, that is going into our countries. It is a positive commandment to extirpate the 7 nations, destroy them. And I'll put in some links if you want to see rabbis discussing, how Christians are the Amalek, how Rome is the Amalek, that it's a positive, and this needs to happen. And, if they're going to bring on the king and the Messiah. And then it goes on to talk about at some point the sons of Noah, the Gentiles. Okay. So if they make peace and accept the 7 commandments upon the sons of Noah, the Gentiles, none of them are killed, but must pay us tribute. And they shall be for you a tributary, and they shall serve you. Okay, so these are the people that are the discretionary war. So if you're an Amalek, you're out. But if you are part of the discretionary war, so whoever those people are, and they have the ability to become a Noahide. So really, not every Gentile gets to even be a Noahide. Only the ones that are not Amalek. If they propose to accept upon themselves the payment of the tribute, but not servitude, or they accept servitude but not tribute, we ignore the proposal until they accept both. If they do, they make peace but do not accept the 7 commandments, we engage war against them and slay their adult males. We take all their money and their children as spoils. We do not kill the women and minors, as it says the women. Okay, but this is not the Amalek, by the way. These are the Noahides. So there's the distinguish between the Amalek and the Noahide. With one of the 7 nations, or with the Amalek who do not make peace, we leave no soul alive. And then, this document talks about what the 7 Noahide laws are. It talks that Christianity is a violation of the Noahide laws. I've tried to go through it, and I'll just drop it in there. Anyone who fails to accept them, the 7 Noahide laws here, the sons of Noah's, is executed, right? And there you go. It seems, and here's what they list them: idolatry, blessing euphemistically the name of God, murder, illicit sexual relations, thievery, and establishing the systems of justice. That seems like 6, but I'll drop that in there, and then open up the discussion because it's a little bit of a difficult document to stomach it. And then I'll show you the Canadian ones after, because that's actually being voted on in Parliament. And it's insane right now. The Justice Minister is actually saying this is essential to be passed. It's essential. They will do anything to pass it right now in Canada. And it's a veiled capital punishment clause. But, if you have any reaction to that, there you go. That's
Elizabeth, you were going to say something?
Oh, well,
their own documents describe it, and the collapse of the West. We're watching the collapse of the West, and we're like, oh, it's incompetence. Our leaders are incompetent. And then it aligns with the 7 Noahide laws and the destruction of the Amalek.
The problem that, like, if you tell a Jewish person about these laws, they'll say, you're crazy. That's completely crazy talk. And they'll look up the law and they'll say, look, there's nothing in here about decapitation. They'll say, they'll disregard you. So the legal reality I want to point to that is very, very concerning, and that people with a legal background will understand this. Laws are meant to be very specific. It's when they're vague that we lose our rights. And HJ Res 104, Education Day USA, is very, very problematically vague. So you can look up the vagueness doctrine online. And so for the last line, that's really problematic of the law. And if you print out the law, it's very interesting. Here's it's very short. You can look it up yourself, but here's the part that Lisa showed before. And then on the second page is this little blurb here. And the very last line is very problematic, and I'll read it. The president is requested to issue a proclamation calling for the people of the United States to observe such day with appropriate ceremonies and activities. Now, a ceremony or activity can be literally anything. So that line right there, it is very, very problematic. And that an activity, for example, chopping off someone's head is an activity. And also you can find proof of the is in the fine print on Chabad.org's website. So if you go on Chabad.org and you look up in the search the word decapitation or some decapitation and Noahide, you'll find proof there. So, and also if you look into Trump, the way he talks about the capital punishment is very, very concerning. So I think I'm very solutions oriented. So if some of you, if listeners think that this is just complete insanity, Court Watch the courts, which I want to talk about later, is very important, and fight capital punishment. Right.
You mentioned
forms of capital punishment because they're very specific to the decapitation clause is very specific. Thank you.
If I could just get your thoughts. So everything you're mentioning now, and we know they want to democide us, right? Eugenics is a key factor, democide, COVID, and what these abortion laws. I think I was watching on some stuff. Was it from Israel News, Steven and Jana, your channel, about abortion? So they're pushing it, full-term abortion, the euthanasia laws made all across country after country. They're bringing this stuff in. Even Mexico, just a few weeks ago, they started to introduce some of these things. And then Trump coming out talking about capital punishment for sedition. And it seems like these are forerunners perhaps for what's coming. Just your thoughts on sort of that.
Is that for you?
No,
Oh, sorry. No, yes, I agree 100%. I was just yesterday, I saw this article that had popped up on the Times of Israel where the far right MK support news-shaped pins as they're doing a hearing on a controversial death penalty, because Israel's not done putting anyone to death since 1962, when they dealt with the guy they had smuggled back in from South America, accusing him of crimes against Jews in the Holocaust. But Israel's laws have been changing very radically over the probably the last few decades. And abortion was one of them. They used to have the most stringent abortion laws in the world, and now they're the most liberal. They're even allowing a child to be killed up to, I think it's 30 days after the child is born. There's some really controversial things in there. And you would have never thought Israel would actually do something like that. But then we have the other issues that are going on too right now. As you mentioned there, Trump takes and he threatens these lawmakers, they should be hung, literally. And it's kind of interesting. They're wearing these little noose lapel pins in Israel, so you kind of get where all that's coming from. So they're setting the way, they're setting the precedent for what they want to be able to do in their new global system. And what's really also kind of frightening, if you think about it, there's always been this huge talk and debate about I believe it's trying to think of the name of the website there, where it's a CIA-ran website, and they talk about so many people are going to die by, I think it's 2026 or 2025.
Deagle.
Yeah, the Deagle report, right? And everybody's trying to figure out, it's going to be this or it's going to be that, What if it's nothing more than or nothing less than the Noahide Laws themselves? What if that's where it is? And by the way, when you're talking about Rome earlier, Rome equals Esau in Judaism. Esau equals Christianity. And this nation is slated for destruction. When I say this nation, the United States, and I really feel for Elizabeth in this and what she's had to wake up to, because I came from Jewish parents, although we weren't very religious, so I didn't grow up under any type of religious training or anything, and so I became a Christian fairly easy. I was one of the first ones in my family to do that, and But nonetheless, for Jewish people that have never even heard of this, because there are different types of forms of Judaism, just like there are in Christianity, it's a shock for a lot of Jewish people. And that's why you see a lot of Reform Jews and things of that nature, even standing up against Israel and the genocide that they're doing. But why are they doing the genocide? Well, she just read the very laws there out of the law of the kings. It's Amalek. Amalek, there's no sparing of women or children or anything.
No, no. Under the Jewish law, the halakha, you can spare the children and women who had no sexual relations with men. So
No, we're not
maidens.
talking about that though. What she was reading right there in the entire Chabad breakdown of what it was. If it was Amalek, they don't spare women or children. Every soul must die.
Is that
It's
what was
written
there?
in there.
Yeah, that's what
Oh,
it says. The seven nations and the
Yeah.
Amalek. So the 7 nations are everywhere Rome went, plus 6 nations in the Middle East. And then the Amalek is Christianity. So you could be a Christian in a non 7 nation. So it requires extirpation, like a complete genocide. And so it's a supremacy regime that is hidden that that is difficult. And these kinds of documents have to be exposed because we have always the dialogue of, to fear Islam or to fear Christian fundamentalist or, this language without knowing that there's an actual war plan that requires the extirpation, which is extermination to the last living soul. Extirpation of the Amalek and the 7 nations. And that's a mandatory mitzvah. So it's a requirement under God. That's the view of, and I'm sure it's not the view of most Jewish people that I know and love in my life. It's such a hard thing for me to reconcile because I've been so close to many Jewish people that I've loved. And so this is really difficult, but I'm also, I suppose, an Amalek. And I love a lot of the people. Why be silent, despite how difficult it is to discuss? And so, that's it. But, the forfeiture clause in Canada for this new Bill C9, which we have hate legislation in Canada, and they've brought in Bill C, which is the third letter, 9. Like, so 3 9s or 3 6s upside down. Like it's a beast number. And every forfeiture clause that I researched refers to property, things, objects, proceeds of crime. In this forfeiture clause, it nudges that they're grabbing property, right? Mm-hmm. But in fact, it enables them to grab the person. And I'm going to share the screen just briefly so you see how just horrific the laws can look and be vague at the same time. So here's Bill C9, which is now before the government in Canada. It's had 2 votes on it so far, approving it. Then it went to committee. They made it worse. And it's ready to be passed on the 3rd reading. So one of the things you notice is this is how a Noahide law will look. So willful promotion of hatred, hate symbols. What's the hate symbol? So everyone who commits an offense by displaying the symbol. Okay, so what is a symbol? It's the Nazi swastika, good riddance, whatever. I'm not too, the only people who use it are government false flags, in my view. A symbol that represents A or B, and then A, something that's associated with a listed entity. And so what that is they get to designate a hate group. Now, in the debate, Mark Miller said it was hate, to quote, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Acts, and Romans. So what's the symbol? Well, it's the cross or the Bible. So he can actually make Christianity a listed entity. And then he says other religious texts. That can be, I suppose, the Quran. So you have here, you make Christians the listed entity, then the symbol is the Bible or the cross. You're captured. And then the offense is that you display that you are part of the group. It's the symbol. You haven't done anything. You haven't run off and done some mean thing or said mean things. You're just part of the group because you have the Bible or the cross.
I just want to add an example, which I think is related to this. A few years ago, here in Mexico, in the state of Colima, a Christian female politician merely posted Bible quotes on her private personal Facebook page, and they removed her from her government position. So
right, and same with the World on Mute. That's why I was awakened to this whole concept, because the Finland case, right? It's hate speech. She put on the Bible as hate speech, and I'll go on to that in a little bit. But forfeiture here. Oh, okay. This is what jumped out at me. Okay, there's two ways to read this, but there's every forfeiture clause lists property. There's no property in here. So go like this: a person convicted, in addition to any other punishment imposed, may be ordered by the presiding provincial judge or judge to be forfeited to His Majesty the King in right of province for disposal, as the Attorney General may direct. A person, this is how it can look, may be ordered to be forfeited to His Majesty the King. And all they have to do is add a person's property seized, right? May be ordered by the presiding judge to be forfeited to His Majesty the King. They could add the word property. That's 8 letters. They could add object. They could add thing, right? So here's a qualifier. Even the qualifier can be interpreted as the person. Anything by means or relation to which the offense was committed. Well, that's an action by means of. Who did the offense? That's the person. This is how a Noahide law comes into law in Canada. This is how a forfeiture clause is drafted as a forfeiture to His Majesty the King for disposal. So I see it. And this is where the crazy part comes in for me. I have been reaching out to rights organizations and lawyers, etc., and media on the alternative side. And everybody has a false, what I call a red herring argument that's, bad on the bill. So, oh no, the threshold for hate is really, really low, or, they're putting in an amendment that we don't like. And everybody's avoiding that. Once you call Christians the listed entity, you capture the whole group. Then the symbol is being Christian, having the cross, having the Bible. And just displaying it. Just displaying it. And then no one's talking about that. So it's almost like what I would say the opposition. They place people in opposition, and those are the people that get all the traction on everything. And the people who are pointing out that this is a decapitation clause, I get no traction on it, and I don't get all the people who are the who's who in the alternative media are radio silent on this. So it's a very frightening thing. And I'll let you discuss what you think, but we're on our third reading, and this could go through. And if it doesn't go through, I'll tell you, it'll be because I've reached out to Muslims that I'm good friends with, and their groups have taken it on And every single Muslim organization has denounced in its entirety Bill C-9. So rights organizations are denouncing it, but they're not pointing this out. Either, I'm the only person who sees it. Tell me, do you see it? Do you see what I see?
No, I think that's all clear. And when you read that for disposal, that is pretty wild. I mean, I don't know how to interpret it any other way. I do want to sort of jump to get people's opinions on Trump and the Zionism and I think many countries, particularly in the West, and I've seen stuff Putin in Russia, right, tight with Chabad, and so people's thoughts on Trump, because on the one hand he's pretending to be cling closer to quote Christianity, right, Christian nationalism, which I think is kind of a psyop, and then you've got all these different characters of in alternative media. You've got all this ruckus now of anti-Semitism rising and saying anti-Zionism now is anti-Semitism, and now creating punishment for anti-Semitism. And Trump is going to have his fifth meeting with Netanyahu, and basically, then you've got the Larry Ellisons, the tech oligarchs, many of which are Zionists, Sam Altman, Larry Ellison. So I don't know what people, just your opinions on how do you, and then they're talking about Trump as like Cyrus or something. According to these Zionist plans. So do people have thoughts? How do you read factor Trump and his administration into all of this?
Well, I will talk a little bit on it, but yes, I mean, as Trump as Cyrus, that was mainly 2016. That's when this idea came out. And according to Jewish law, he is a Josephic Messiah. Jews have two messiahs, by the way. I don't know if people are aware of this, but it's a Josephic Messiah and Davidic Messiah. And the Josephic Messiah can be even Edomite if it's a good Edomite who works for them. So, yeah, if it's an Edomite in power, he can be considered Josephic Messiah. So at the time in 2016, that's what they were saying, that he's a Josephic Messiah, Edomite, who is repairing all the guilt of Edom against the Jews from the past, you see, because they're still holding grudges from the time of temple, just because the temple fell in 70 AD, they hold grudges, okay, and they want Rome destroyed. That's Europe has to be destroyed. Like you said, Amalek is Europe, Edom is Europe, and West and Christianity in general. So he's in the role of their Josephic Messiah, Edomite, who is to bring the Davidic Messiah. So one thing I want to point to when you said that people say he's a Christian. If you are a true, real Christian and you listen to Trump and study Trump, you know he's not a Christian. I mean, if you say he's a Christian, you know that you must be a very bad Christian yourself, because Trump is not a Christian. He is acting like it artificially for the evangelical community that's embracing him, especially with Paula White in the White House. She's in the faith office, right? But I will tell you this, Paula White is under a betzin, under a certain female rabbi in Jerusalem, and she studies with her. And she actually said recently, not long time ago, that Christians need to learn from the Jews. Right, so she's all for the Noahide Laws. She's bringing her group right into the Noahide Laws, but so are most of the pastors in the United States. They're basically bringing the flock to transition to Noahide Laws very smoothly. So one thing also I wanted to portray here is, and I don't want to scare anybody because I don't want people to be scared. After my last show with John B. Wells, somebody said that they were scared for the first time in their life. I'm like, I don't want to scare you. But Noahide Academy in Israel, Jerusalem, is already training Noahide judges. It's a real thing, and it's a 3-year program. And for the judges program, they're encouraging lawyers like yourselves, right? Like come here and take the 3-year program, and they're giving them and equipping them how to be a Noahide judge. And they're also equipping Noahide teachers. So on their website, it says that that's going to be future. Okay. The Noahide movement is rapidly growing. It's rapidly growing. What was the first steps toward this were infiltration of Christianity with Hebrew roots movement, coming back to the law, fascination of a Hebrew and Hebrew words. You know, if you don't say Jesus, but Yeshua, you're somebody special. Or if you say Shalom, Shalom, and all kinds, you know, Baruch Hashem, that became like here in the United States, Christians adopted this as something wonderful, and Hebraic roots movement started growing huge. So out of evangelicals now, there's many evangelicals that went into Hebrew roots movement. And once they're in this Hebrew roots movement, they are taught that Jesus is not divine. So they accept that, and they eventually transition to become a Noahides. Now, in fact, we live in Texas here with Steve right now, and we have a group here in Texas. Noahidism is growing like crazy. There are Texas ranchers. They have these red heifers that they're creating and flying them to state of Israel, and Israel is now practicing for the real deal. And they're burning them alive in all kinds of practice ceremonies because they're preparing the temple. Now, the temple is so important to them, right? This is the tikkun olam. I don't know if you know that Hebrew word, tikkun olam, but that's their doctrine of tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. They believe that God gave them the commission to repair the world, to bring it back to morals and take over entire world and have a control over all of the nations. So they're preparing out of this little Israel country that they call Israel. They're conquering, and they are going to conquer. They're doing Oded Yinon plan of 1980. Okay, they're creating greater Israel, and it's not going to stop there. It's just not going to stop there. Eventually, their laws and vision, long-term vision, is to call this planet Israel. They're going to rename the planet as Israel. So they're preparing certain countries like Ukraine, for example. They want Ukraine, Patagonia. If you look into this, they're Argentina, Patagonia, this area over there. They are taking all of these nations that have this wonderful soil, because entire agriculture, food preparation, everything is going to change. They're going to control food distribution. And they believe that nations owe them this, that God will give them ruling power over the entire earth, and nations are going to be giving them wealth. They're going to take everything away from everyone. So that's their vision. I'm just saying what they believe, but so far everything they believe is happening. I mean, they're moving the direction rapidly. And now when I learned that they're actually teaching in Jerusalem, like they're preparing Noahide judges. So once we have this economic collapse, go ahead. Yes.
I just mentioned the Substack that I did, that we co-wrote about the judges.
Yes, I just had it. It's on my Substack.
It doesn't.
Elizabeth,
on my Substack, it's not there. I just went to search for it, and it's not there. But it's on your Substack. I don't know why. But Jana and I co-wrote a Substack about the Noahide judges, because I had done research in January 2025. I said, if they are in fact going to be instituting this Noahide, because most people listening to this who don't know anything about this, they're going to say, those people are crazy. That's psychotic. I don't believe them. So I said, okay, well, if they are in fact going to institute, obviously I don't think we are, but if they are going to institute this, these Noahide courts, then that calls for the decapitation of Christians. That's absolutely insane. Virtually no American judge would be in alignment with that. So for them to be in alignment with it, I would imagine that they would be covertly assassinating judges throughout the United States. And sure enough, I did research, and it appears that American judges are being covertly assassinated throughout the United States. And I just put that out there and got very little response. And then Jana asked me to co-write an article asking, are American judges being assassinated, covertly assassinated, in order to make way for the Noahide judges? And just putting the question out there. So sorry to interrupt, Jana.
No, that's perfect. I want
Can I throw a thing in there on that? I think it's interesting to think about, Elizabeth, especially, and I remember reading that article that you girls did together. And it reminds me of Vladimir Putin and what he did when he was first running. I remember Eduardo Hudo, who was a former rabbi for the Chabad organization. He was recruited by Menachem Schneerson because he was the mayor of Kharkiv, Ukraine, when they were preparing to do the war between Russia and Ukraine to kill off the Slavic peoples of that region.
Yeah.
That was just part of one of the global agendas they wanted to do, and it was also a blood libel that they were doing against the Christians that lived there, but the pogroms, etc. He did later convert to become a Russian Orthodox Christian, but in saying this, though, he brought out something very interesting about Putin. Before Putin ever came to power, he was flying over to Israel to try to get some support from the Israelis for some projects they were doing in Ukraine. And the governor at the time of his province was flying with him. I think his name was Rabinovich. And they're flying back. And when they did, he says, oh, by the way, my cousin is fixing to rise to power in Russia. He said, who's your cousin? He says, Vladimir Putin. All right. Now, most people think Vladimir Putin's a Christian, but he's actually Jewish. And so he said, oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, he never really thought much about it. So what did Putin do? And this is what Edward Hudo brought out. He said, just like they tried to recruit me for this war in Ukraine, he said, and I refused to do it. That's one of the reasons why I stepped away from Judaism. He said it just was wrong to do that. But he said that Putin did exactly what he promised, though, when he came into power. And that was he swore to the Russians he would get rid of all the oligarchs, which were basically Reformed Jews that were running the nation through the banks and things like that. But no one expected him, as he got rid of them, though, to install the Chabad group instead into power, and they overthrew it. So going back to the idea of what's going on with the judges here, would judges here, and because there are many judges that are Jewish, many judges that are lawyers, etc., but they're more what we would say today, like you have Democrat Republicans, more of a democratic type of nature. And so they're not going to necessarily go along with this idea of, oh, we're going to have this type of new system here where we just start beheading everybody we don't agree with. They wouldn't go for it. So you've got to overthrow it. And that's what Putin did in Russia. And that's what Trump is doing in America already. And no wonder why Marjorie Taylor Greene stepped out of the race, because she wouldn't take AIPAC money, which was really a shock. I didn't even know that, but she showed that she never took a dime from AIPAC. She stood for America first, but she got duped by Trump. And then Trump's calling for her to be hung. So it's kind of weird.
I've got I guess, a couple of questions there. So who would you say then, who's running the show, right? Catherine Austin Fitts talks about Mr. Global. I cite Mark Passio, ex-Satanist, who calls it the occultocracy. Right. We've got all of these groups, the Bilderbergs, the Trilaterals, the British Roundtables, the Zionists, who would you guys say is the biggest faction or force or most powerful group? I mean, based on this discussion, it's sounding like these groups that we're talking about. How would everyone here explain who is at the helm of this push towards world government?
What I heard was that we never saw the face of these people, the real players. or heard their name. That all of these people that are in public eye are just basically put there to do this agenda. But what I do know is that what was chosen for this agenda, it's Satan basically behind them. Like it's Satan. That's his world. This dimension is his world. But they have chosen the Jewish Talmud as the basis for international law. So we know that that's what's chosen. And
well, I think when we're looking at this, I mean, when I would sit there, because I was a business owner and stuff, I sat with lawyers, doctors that were part of the Chabad groups that I would go to in South Florida. I knew practically every Chabad rabbi throughout the entire southern states of Florida, both east and west coast. And I would sit there with respectable people, doctors, surgeons, and we would have meetings together. And then we'd start talking about, things that are going to come. And the one thing that always kind of blew me away is when they'd start talking about, oh, we're going to have 2,000 Gentile slaves, and I would be like, really, and and they'd be like, Steve, what's wrong with you? Your mother, what did she not raise you right? You don't know what your own people were going to do, and I'm like, that one's new to me. I didn't know that, and they'd be like, oh my God, it's in the Talmud. You need to read the Talmud, and get with the Rebbe and he'll help you. These are things that you hear, but you kind of just think, oh, it's just kind of funny. But then when Lisa's reading what the Canadian laws are written there, and they could take basically ownership of you. It's basically what it sounds like to me, that in Canada, if they pass this, if something doesn't go right, well, guess what? You're going to become somebody's slave. So it's almost like things are just being set up for it. But to answer that, in the Chabad organization, because they are the most politically minded, motivated group, but they also are very, very connected with the most wealthiest Jewish people in the world, because Chabad doesn't mean everybody's running around with, the black suit, black hat, and, and tzitzit on. They're very much the makers and shakers of society and government and everything. It's almost like CIA or Mossad or, MI6, et cetera, or KGB. They are the most embedded around the world, in every country in the world. And so whoever's at the top of that group there, and I know we normally hear, the Rothschilds, things like that. And I'm sure that that's one of the families that would be involved, but it will be the wealthiest families of them all. And I would always say, link it back to how the state of Israel came into being. And maybe that might give us some insight as to who would be the financiers who really call the shots, because it's definitely not the president of the United States.
I researched World on Mute, and I found that every way to earn a living, here it is, was being collected transnationally, transoccupationally. And then if you were in UBI or you didn't earn a living, you were given the same speech committee. So what happens is you enter into a social credit system in which the speech that you have dictates whether or not you earn a living. Now, the powers that I researched in the book, I use different examples because the book is broken down to medical, and that's where I get into the AI medical, legal, constitutional. Then I get into the woke ideology, and finally emergency powers. But speech becomes the new emergency. And I was reading the laws. The first time I read Bill 36 in Canada, I wept. Like, I just bawled my eyes out.
What was 36? What's 36? I'm sorry.
Bill 36 gave the power action of professions in the health area. But then it said it would govern you if you spoke to them or sent letters to them or had any communications with them. So everybody and their grandmother. And then they get to govern you if it was in the public interest. And then within that, they get all kinds of outrageous powers to mandate you to take, preventative medicine. To mandate all kinds of things, search and seizure without judge's order. And then they get little Stasi units to go around, and those Stasi units, everything goes up to like a centralized power, and those Stasi units get further powers on an as needed basis. And then there was what stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You couldn't compel anybody to give evidence to courts. Nothing that was done under these units would go to courts. And, a continual insistence on a power on an as needed basis. And I was reading it. It was just insane. And then it said, and any international law that gets passed becomes part of the law. So then you pass the Noahide Laws internationally or anywhere else, then that becomes the law. And they had these powers on an as needed basis that insulated them. So when I was describing the courts that I was seeing that were going to replace the courts, and I say that you become regulated, you become a global citizen. I said to myself, they're going to replace the courts, and it's a one beast system. And I kept calling it the beast system. And so I think the courts actually have already been set up and practiced throughout COVID through what were our speech committees that told you, okay, you can't say a woman can't have 5 penises, and that she must have several penises or at least one. You have to say the right thing about the vaccines and about mandatory apartheid, medical apartheid. You have to say pro-nation state speech in Africa is wrong. All of these things enforce the global order and is all described on how you can earn a living. The next stage is hate and imprisonment. And after that, the next stage is, of course, decapitation. And within that, those people are already doing absurd things that the courts then give credence to under the concept of judicial notice. So what you have is a Noahide system of courts embedded already and active. And so then your courts or judges that would invalidate those things. It's a very powerful video that Elizabeth has compiled of all the judges in the US that have died tragic and unexpected, weird, accidental deaths. It's frightening. But I actually do think that perhaps the Jewish people are the answer, in that they insist not in my name. They might find this all just too absurd. And if they find it absurd, they say not in my name, right? I think to a certain extent, it's the appeal to the average ethical Jewish person that I've known my whole life, those people that I've known my whole life, right? That wouldn't want me and my children decapitated. And I think we're all in boxes that we get polarized, where we say, I'm Christian, I'm Jewish, I'm Muslim, I'm X, Y, Z, and therefore I'm trans, I'm rainbow. I'm supposed to, be fighting you here. And we should be looking up and decide whether or not global satanic order should describe our future. Right? Should it describe our future? You need only to look at the WEF logo, the Google Chrome logo. All the logos come out with occult. So who's at the top is likely the demons that they're worshiping that give them power. And to anyone who's getting power from demons, and I know this is an odd conversation as a lawyer to be having, but I'm very spiritual as well. The ultimate deceiver's goal is to deceive even his most ardent followers, and he would want to take their souls into hell. So it's this idea that they think, well, we'll make hell on earth for these other people, and this is our life. There is an afterlife, and if you're working for this demonic system, you're selling to warn them. We have a duty to warn them that their souls are in jeopardy. And we should not fear man. We should fear God. And we should ask God to put his presence and prayer over our conversation so that it touches the heart of the people that hear this. Because if they have eyes to see and ears to hear, they will see what's going on. And it's not the average Jewish person. It's not. You can't use it as discrimination.
I've got just a few questions left. I don't want to bring this up, which is slightly off tangent, but earlier, Stephen, you mentioned Belt and Road and Israel, and in the podcasting alternative media space, there's been in the past few weeks, in particular, shots fired, fighting between fellow travelers. And I'm of the opinion you mentioned Putin and Russia. I mean, just putting my question out there. I don't see any opposition really to technocratic globalism anywhere. And this idea of BRICS multipolarity, I've been saying that this BRICS multipolar movement is merely the rebranding of world government. You had Xi Jinping come out and say, a global governance initiative, UN 2.0, they're all down with technocracy. Just any thoughts on that?
Well, it's exactly right. In fact, I watch Americans for the most part run around saying that they glorify Putin and saying, "Oh, Putin, he's fighting the New World Order. He's against the liberalists in America and their global New World Order they want to do." But yet, Putin has actually used that very verbiage himself and has stated that we need a. And here's what's really ironic. He states we need a new world governance with a just set of laws. That's what he calls it, with a just set of laws. All right, that's Talmud Noahide Laws 101 right there for the rest of the world to be paying attention to. So yes, I agree wholeheartedly. It's just rebranding the package. And quite frankly, there's a lot that has to do with the fact the United States has it's used all of its resources and finances and then printed a bunch of fiat currency in order to be able to finance all the wars that Israel's wanted to fight in order to overthrow the entire Middle East as much as they could. That being said, I'll throw one thought out here too. When we were mentioning Amalek earlier, last night I was interviewing with Colin, another friend of mine there. We did a simulcast with Phil Turney, the survivor of the USS Liberty. And he stated that there were bombers, not Russian, but bombers armed with nuclear weapons up in the air. As soon as the USS Liberty was sunk, they were going to use nuclear bombs on Egypt to get that was USS Liberty in the bottom of the ocean was to get us to go into a war to start World War III so that they could do a land grab. And he said, had we sunk, they would have went ahead and used those nukes. He said, our survival saved millions of lives. And again, why? They're Amalek. So when I bring this up because this rebranding of the BRICS program and this whole new global system, the BRICS nations, which, by the way, Israel's a major hub in that. A former friend of mine, I should say, his wife is one of the chief financial officers for the Israeli government. And about 2 years ago, he was telling me that his wife was already over in Russia doing negotiations secretly for Israel to be a part of the BRICS nation, but they're not letting anybody know because they want to dump all the US dollars. So they don't have any of that as they bring the U.S. down.
That's a lot to chew on for folks. Elizabeth, I think you had a few other points.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to make the important point that, I had the bat mitzvah in the 80s at a Reform synagogue on Long Island. And Reform, for people who don't know, there's Orthodox Jews, which, the traditional clothing. And they, I learned this from Jana, they have 613 laws. And then there's assimilated Jews. And assimilated Jews are just people, where I'm assimilated Jew. And so that's basically Reformed. And when I went to Hebrew school, at my bar mitzvah, I had friends who were Jewish. I had friends who were Christian. It didn't matter. But at Hebrew school, I remember when they talked about the Talmud, they said very specifically that is for Orthodox men. We did not study the Talmud. I'm sure that there were certain parents, I was just a kid, but I'm sure that there were certain parents who knew about the Talmud, didn't like it, and were assured by the Hebrew school administrators that we're not studying that, not studying that. This is just about Israel. This is just about your bar mitzvah. That's what I suspect. And then Ron Unz, who's also Jewish and similarly Jew, he has an article about the Talmud, which I encourage people to read, particularly Jews. And he says that less than a very small percentage of Jews are familiar with the contents of the Talmud. So this is just all, in my opinion, a big setup. And I did a video about what happened to Jana and Steven's family, which maybe we could put in the show notes. And it's a 20-minute documentary. And I did a book based on that video because it talks about just how a lot of this between the different religions are just a big setup. You know what I mean? I was raised to think that people wanted to kill me just because I'm Jewish. Do you know what I mean? And that trauma has a very strong impact on people. And I think it's the reason that I suspect that was the motive in the crime that was committed against the murder of Jana's father. I'm so sorry, Jana. So it's kind of a separate topic, but yeah, I mean, Jewish people, like they would hear about this and they'd be told, every Jewish person I know in my life would be totally against this. This is all being done from people at the top. And there's also a very strong Masonic involvement in this as well. So even if Henry Macau said that even if and I agree with him, if every Jew disappeared tomorrow, it would still go ahead because of the Freemasons. And again, they're the regular Freemasons at the lower levels, just like Jews, they're not aware of the goals of their organization and what happens at the top. So
yeah, and that's why I like the term occultocracy. And I often think like Netanyahu, in a sense, we can say he's not even Jewish. He's pushing this program that it's, the British royalty, the Freemasons, it's this occult stuff that's going. Ultimately, it's satanic. When people ask me, as a Christian, I have to say, who's running the show? I mean, it's Lucifer, Satan. Why waste our time trying to figure out that black box in between what we can see, trilaterals, Bilderbergs, and Satan, and then there's that big black. It's Satan, okay? And
you guys,
you
guys are wonderful Christians, but the vast majority of Christians in the United States were for the mass murder of Palestinians in Gaza the last few years.
Yeah,
which
very sad to say. Exactly.
And yeah, that sort of brings me to one of my final questions is Christian Zionism and I'm sort of in the middle, and I'm okay with not having a defined view. You can call me a fundamentalist Christian, of the Baptist evangelical Protestant persuasion, but I'm not a Zionist. I'm still open to seeing, there's different theologies where some people say the church is Israel, or the references to the prophecies are to the people of Israel, the state of Israel, eventually being saved by God in the last days. So I oscillate between those two. I can still see the creation of the state of Israel as a supernatural event, but putting that aside, everything that we're discussing is like, yeah, this is not part of God's plan. How do you guys sort of square? How are we supposed to see Zionism and Christianity?
So let's just look at it logically in terms of right now, you're not allowed to disagree with the state of Israel. And if you do, you're viewed as anti-Semitic. So what you've done is the centralization of everything. You've made Bibi Netanyahu, who sort of like a messiah figure who can do no wrong. And so that invalidates the concept of democracy and denudes the Israeli people from even the concept of dissent, right? So what is anti-Semitism? Is it approving of Benjamin Netanyahu's actions now? Or is it if you get a new president who has peace in the Middle East, which one was the anti-Semitism? Which one was the faction that you're supposed to agree with? So the idea of making the actions of Mary with respect to war as the litmus test for whether or not you love the Jewish people or not is very interesting. And I think one of one of the concepts I think of to tie it back into the Noahide laws is perhaps they're thinking, well, this is how we're going to bring the law of Abraham or the, word of God to people around the world. But it is a sort of a supremacy version of it, because it's not even saying here you're going to be on equal footing. And not that I want to be converted to Islam, but if Sharia law comes in, you're converted to force to Islam, but then you're equal. In such a situation here, there's this idea that the covenant remains only with Israel. It never moves to the other people. The souls are an equivalent, or the souls are, of animals. And I don't think that really accords with how most Jewish people really want to be thought of. It's, they've assimilated, they love their fellow man, they love their nation state, and they also want to preserve the West themselves. But the idea is, I don't think God wants a supremacy version. And this is what's required of a Noahide, because the Noahide is a lesser status, and there's lots of rabbis, that you can find saying, we have a different heaven. We don't go to the high heaven. We go to the lower heaven. So it's this idea of supremacy. And, biblically, if you look at the LXX, which is the Septuagint, there are real material differences between the Masoretic, the Masoretic version of the Bible, which was translated in 1008 by rabbis who had 1,000 years of Christians, and the Septuagint, which was as a result of the Greek Empire, which was in all synagogues by 285 years before Christ, and which was which was quoted by the Jewish apostles who knew the Old Testament at the time. It accords with the Septuagint. So, I don't see placing the state of Israel into any kind of holy regime whatsoever. I don't, biblically or otherwise.
Okay, so the question was, what is Zionist Christianity, or where? Like, what's the truth about it?
No. I mean, just how how are Christians? Myself as a Christian, I guess a question for myself: how are we supposed to view? Because you've got Christianity, you've got Zionism. They're meshing politics with this occult project. How do we view biblically? How should Christians biblically view Israel? My view is that I can view the state of Israel coming back in 1948 as part of prophecy and part of God's plan. God uses his enemies, right, to achieve his goals. But that's me. I'm not saying now I view the state of Israel as corrupt as every other state on the planet, which is under Satan's domain, and what they're doing in Gaza, obviously wrong. But there are other prophecies that say, they're doing bad stuff, but God is going to discipline them, and eventually some of them will come to believe as well. How do you guys interpret that?
Well, I might have. Okay, I know what you're saying, because this is how they are defending prophecy. The dispensationalists are. That is, they're saying that they're going to look upon him whom they pierced, like whom they killed, Jesus, and then they're going to mourn for him, and then going to return, they will eventually accept Jesus. This is what they're saying. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Well, this is my personal opinion, because, there's so many denominations and within Christianity. So my personal, what I came to is, to me, Zionist Christianity is absolute heresy. It's not Christianity at all, in fact. But that's just my opinion. That's how I would describe it. Judeo-Christianity is absolute oxymoron. They don't even go together at all, because Judaism and Christianity are complete opposites in redemption, in who their Messiah is. They're not compatible. They will never come together. So to say Judeo-Christianity as a word is an oxymoron. Now, I view Israel as one of the many other nations. I don't give it any high status. I believe that they took name Israel by deception. It was decided that they will be called Israel. In fact, when they were sending Jews there from Europe, the whole thing about Holocaust as well, what happened was that Hitler cooperated with Zionist Jews from America, and they created that place with what's happening today in mind. They had this plan. You have to understand, these people plan ahead, hundreds years ahead. They don't plan. That's not a 5-year plan that they have. They have 500-year plan. Okay, so they have prepared this place because they knew what they're going to do. And that was the beginning of all of this. So Hitler was a Zionist. So he was sending Jews there against their will. The Jewish people in Germany, they were very comfortable. They were lawyers, they were doctors, they were shop owners. They didn't want to leave Germany. Jewish doctors were treating German people, and they lived beautiful lives. They were doing really well, and they were very well treated by the government. And when Hitler came to power, suddenly there was this plan, okay? And I don't know if you know about the coin of commemoration of cooperation between Hitler and Zionist Jews, but there was even a coin. There is even coin that was made to commemorate it. Sorry, commemorate my English. I guess it's getting too late in the day. I'm sorry. But anyway, so yes, the Zionism entered the Christianity around time of Darby and Schofield, and that was also very pre-planned. Schofield was in these big boy clubs, with the Jews, and they chose him to create completely new Bible. It's not an even original Bible. That's why I like, no, I don't like Schofield Bible. Okay, so there was a Bible where Schofield have put commentary, and it was printed inside of the Bible. So when you read Bible verse, you already had it explained. And it was for the first time in Christian history, it was done that way. Why? Because of brainwashing. So it entered American Christianity, and then they put that Schofield Bible as a main Bible for all the seminaries. So they were creating a new generation of pastors and theologians. And when they were congratulating them, they finished their theological seminaries, they handed them gift a Schofield Bible. Reach from that. So all of this was pre-planned. They worked together. All the political forces and religious forces worked together to create that beast that it's about to unleash on all of us. So Israel is basically, to me, quickly, and I'll give it to you, Steve, is that it should be for Christians. Nation as any other, needing of gospel of Jesus Christ. A meaning of Israel in a scripture, Christian Bible, should be spiritual meaning. It's Israel of God is a spiritual nation who is made up of all of the tribes and languages and nations, including Jews. So Jews are not left out, they're invited. So this is my personal position, but go ahead, Steve.
One thing I'll tell you, Jana said to me a little while back, she said, Israel has every right to exist. People are born there. They're Israelis. They don't know any other way. Since even before the Holocaust, we've had Jewish people migrating to that part of the world since the 1800s. Golda Meir said that from 1921 to 1948, her passport said she was a Palestinian. That's her own quotation for herself. So there were Palestinians, and it was called Palestine at that time. We know that. But the whole land got all divided because of the wars and things. The Pope at the time, during 1946, when Ben Gurion went there, he wanted to name the country Judah. He did not want to name it Israel. It was the Pope himself that insisted that it be called Israel. And that's how it got its name. It wasn't because of the Jewish people that were migrating there. And I think sometimes, too, some of the early people that migrated there had really not as much of a clue. I'm sure they had some clue of what the ultimate plan was, but not a full clue of what was going to go down. Now, what I do see that's happening today is that a lot of biblical texts are totally misquoted. And it's not even, you don't have to read Hebrew, even though I can read Hebrew. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just misquoted. It's like, for example, and this is nothing against Jewish people, because the bad thing is it's the Christian pastors that quote this on a regular basis. Whoever blesses Israel, God will bless. Whoever curses Israel, God will curse. It doesn't say that. Not one word does it say that. It's all in a singular. And he speaks to Abraham and says, whoever blesses you, I will bless. And whoever curses you, singular, I will curse. And why? Because God, in his infinite wisdom, knows that the Pharaoh and also Amalek are going to try to take his wife. And he made a promise to them that she was going to bring forth a promised seed. Now, some rabbis argue that there's no such thing as seeds plural, but there definitely is. It's in the Dead Sea Scrolls on multiple occasions. So we do know there is a plural word for seeds. So that seed, singular, was to come. Now, Christians believe that is Jesus Christ, that he was that seed of Abraham, the promise. And really what it was, it goes from the seed of the woman that gets all the way down there. My point being, though, to kind of sum this up, though, I've written 2 books already that were very pro-Israel, completely pro-Israel. The second book, because of knowing the Bielski family and them migrating to Israel and the whole thing there, is written more about that. But the book I'm trying to write now is to correct a lot of the mistakes that I made. I really began to realize, and I got challenged by a good friend of mine, my wife and one other friend of ours, Jennifer, said to me one day, you need to start reading your Bible in the Hebrew language, because you're missing a lot of things that you probably could tell people instead of reading it in English. And it was, the first one was Zechariah 8, the 10 men of the nations take hold of the wing of him that's a Jew. They say actually the hem of the garments has a wing, but it's not even Jew, it's a Judean, one Judean man. They take a hold of his the corner of his garment is what they take a hold of. And they said, then it goes into the plural. We will go with you, for we hear God is with you. I personally believe that was fulfilled in Acts. The 10 men of the nations were the Judeans, not Jews. There were no such thing as the word Jews at that time. But written in the book of Acts, it talks about the Judeans from all the nations. They were Judeans, but they weren't born in Judea. They were born in other nations, and they all spoke other different languages. But it says, according to Peter, that he says it was the house of Israel. He said, be it known unto you, O house of Israel, this same Jesus whom you've crucified is made both Lord and Christ. What does that tell us, though? It tells us, like he said to his disciples, go to only the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So in this, I want to double back real quick to the Pope wanting to call it Israel. Christian Zionists really believe that they are those lost 10 tribes, but they weren't lost in the first place. They were literally there sitting in a Christian Bible that Christians believe, but Schofield decided to rewrite all that history for everybody. And after you already knew this from your church fathers coming down for 1800 years, decided to come up with a whole new theology in order to get this land of Israel started. The Jewish people that went there from the Holocaust, as Jana said, many of them didn't necessarily want to go there. Most of them want to come to America. The Bielski family split. One, I think it was a Soil went to America, and Tovia goes to Israel. One did very well in business, and then Tovia has to leave as well because he wouldn't be a part of the 48 war, killing more Jews just to be able to keep the mandate that the Vatican was working on with Ben-Gurion. So they clash against each other. And even then, they're killing their own. So I think that Zionism today has really crept into Christianity over the last 150 years, and it's corrupted Christianity. And I think that's also the reason why there's a even though they claim they love Israel, at the same time, there's this love-hate relationship too, you know? And the thing is Christians just need to learn to love people for who they are and not worry about trying to convert everybody in the world, you know? And then go back and find out what the Bible really does say, because a lot of these Zionist scriptures, and I've already written 6 chapters of the book now. I have published some of them already, but it's totally messed up.
I guess then to close out, last question, given everything we've discussed, the Noahide Laws, greater planet Israel, as you sort of explained, what do we do to resist some of this madness, and or my question sometimes is twofold. Always we try to resist tyranny in all its forms, but also if we do get overwhelmed, if some of the Bible prophecies say, you know, the beast comes about and takes power over all the planet, what is to be done in terms of preparations to survive and or possibly die well? So thoughts on what do we do? Anybody?
First,
Go
What's
ahead.
up? Who wants
Yeah.
to go
Okay.
first?
I
Okay.
think Elizabeth should go first because I don't know if she answered the Israeli question too.
Oh, about the Zionist Christians.
Yeah.
Oh, well, my only thought on that was I did a video about World War II because the Holocaust happened, but the what we're told is not factually correct in my opinion. And so I did a video talking about how I how I learned what really happened, and it went super viral. And David Icke, amongst many people, shared it on social media, and he said, "Yes, Jewish people have been lied to on every front by their fake leaders, the Sabbateans, who hate them. This Jewish lady, that's me, is getting it. Come on, Jewish people, we are all one consciousness, having a brief human experience. Everything else is illusion. Put down the fault lines of religion, racial, and cultural divisions and see that all of us are being manipulated and controlled by a common force. Together we can bring down this edifice of control, but divided we will not." And I agree with him on that. It seems very clear to me that all the major religions were created to steer people in very problematic ways. Well, I believe in freedom of religion. It just seems like that's very much the case. In terms of solutions, I think spiritual battle, don't be afraid. I don't want people to watch this and be fearful because that's how they control people. Also having a strong mind and keeping yourself as healthy as possible is very important. And also, I didn't mention this before, but very briefly, I ran a grassroots court watching program for many years in New York City in the family court system. And there were such extraordinary problems, which obviously I won't go into now, but I would argue one activist had said that the rather than the Constitution, that the Talmud has in fact been the basis for judicial law in the United States for over a century. And I saw evidence of that firsthand as a court watcher in the court system. And so it's a local battle. So I do think that court watching at the local level and standing up, and there's power in numbers. But just like my political campaign, we organized in New York State to fight the sponsor of the forced vaccination law. And, we didn't win, but we certainly made a dent in that fight. And we've been targeted since, but that's why I've been kind of quiet, because I was like, if parents aren't going to stand up against vaccinations, they're not going to stand up against the Noahide laws. You know what I mean? But in terms of a lot of people are a lot more awake now, and this agenda is going to be executed in the courts, and court watching is very important, and also taking a stand against capital punishment, specifically decapitation, because that's how you'll know who is, what's really happening. It might be done covertly also, just like what's happening with the judges. But the problem is just like with COVID, all these institutions have been captured by the central power that's controlling the world, whoever that may be. But I do believe there's power in numbers, and just to not be afraid. Thanks.
I kind of think you have to do the difficult conversations.
Roseanne, she'll be back.
Whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, you're an atheist or not, the archetype of the Messiah comes back with a sword from his mouth. And so in Revelations, he comes with a sword from his mouth. And so, if you don't believe in God and you're like a Reformed Jew or, just an atheist or a Marxist or whatever, speaking the truth that is super important. And then to myself, I think they wouldn't erect the most perfect censorship in the regime that I describe in World on Mute and, the increased regime that we're going to see if they weren't afraid of our words. So they, in some ways, when they set out their laws and you read them, they also set out their Achilles heel. And so they are actually very much afraid of true speakers and people who bring truth. And so, we can't be afraid. And I put in the comments, but someone who's very, very spiritually told me that, the war is spiritual. My mom told me, this is spiritual. This is spiritual, Lisa. And I'm like, no, it's legal. And then 3 years into researching and everything, and I'm like, it's spiritual. It really is. And so draw strength from where it is that you get it. I cannot believe how wonderful the Bible is. I cannot believe it. I was raised Catholic. Half my family was Protestant, half the family Catholic. And despite being in an organized religion and educated in it, they do not want you to go to scripture. They'll give you prayer books. They'll give you books about saints. They do not want you to read the Bible because there's so much beautiful strength there. And I would say if you haven't delved in it and you're Jewish, go to the Torah, read the Old Testament, just get into it. It's really beautiful. And so that's how I'm dealing with what is really a dystopic time. And it is dystopic. That's how I'm dealing with it.
Well, what I believe is we are not to be quiet. We are not to just be in a corner and say, oh, okay, it was prophesied, it has to happen. A lot of people tell me that. I believe we are to speak up and fight for what's correct and right, for our freedoms in every sense, spiritual freedom and secular freedom. I think as Americans, we are, and I'm an American, even though I have an accent, by the way, but I believe that we are to protect our freedoms and we should come together and we should repeal these Noahide laws and take them completely out of our public law and do not allow this to happen at all. And I think that we could do it. I think we have the power to do it. And we would have a backing of God, backing of Christ to do this. I believe that if this type of life comes upon us, it is because we have allowed it as humanity. That's what I believe. Because Jesus gave us the power. If he's within us, we co-rule with him already in a kingdom. But I think that most Christians are just sleeping. Their religion or their Christianity is just a lip service. It's not really, Christ within them. And they just go along with whatever. So as for me personally, I'm going to speak about it. I'm going to speak my mind. I'm going to do what I think is right. But if Satan prevails temporarily and this type of ugly system will come upon us, I'm going to have to be executed because I don't even want to live under that kind of system. I just don't. So if they better kill me then because I just don't want to be here.
All right.
Exactly.
Stephen?
Just in one closing thought on this here, and that is every prophet of Israel before Christ came himself ended up, I want to say every prophet, you had Samuel, you had Elijah, you had Jeremiah, Micah, Isaiah, many of them died for condemning the very evils that they were getting themselves involved in. And they give their lives already, but it didn't stop them from proclaiming what the Word of God says and what should be done. And I think it's no different. The same thing with Jesus. He was, some would say he was a prophet. We believe that he was a Messiah, but he spoke against what Israel was doing. He spoke against the Pharisees and the Sadducees and what they were doing at that time. The different communities at that time also agreed with him, but not everybody did. But nonetheless, he held his ground. He didn't change from his message. And that's where we have to stand today, regardless of what prophetically may come. Where are we going to stand? And I would say as well, people like Elizabeth are in the same boat that any Christian would be in. Elizabeth knows this very well herself. If she doesn't, she's about to find out. But you can be Jewish all you want. But the moment you begin to stand against the teachings and norms of Judaism, you very easily can lose what they call your Judaism. Not that you really do. I mean, if you're born Jewish, you're Jewish. To me and to any other normal Jewish person would say, I'm Jewish. I don't care what you believe in life. Even if you became a Muslim, you still would be Jewish. That's what you are, right? But that's not the way the Orthodox community sees it. And so therefore, because of her stance that she's made as well, they go to enact these laws. She won't be protected any more than a Christian would not be protected. And that's really the cold, hard, sober truth. It's one of the reasons why I say, a lot of Christians end up tending to be a little bit more critical of people that are not Christians, but we shouldn't. I just listened to an NDE of a Muslim woman that she said when she had her near-death experience, hit by a truck and died instantly. She said the next thing I know, I'm standing there and she says, I know who the guy is. It's Jesus. And I'm like, well, I'm in the wrong place. Sorry, you're not supposed to be here. And she didn't know how to deal with that. And she said, but she was dead 15 minutes. And she says, look, I was married to an imam. I hated it, but I was married to him, right? And he says, and do you know how many times you prayed since you were married? And she says, yes. And she knew exactly 5 times a day for 11 years. And he says, I heard every one of them. She said, you couldn't have. I never prayed to you. I didn't believe in you. I believed in, Allah. I didn't believe in you. And then he made this very strange comment to her. He says, you prayed to Allah, but your spirit was crying out to me every time. And then I thought of those famous words, I believe it's of Paul, where he says, the spirit within us groans, making intercessions that we do not even know how to utter. So that's one thing I think Christians should remember as the words of what Paul said there, because many times we judge people based on the belief that they have, not knowing what's really in that person's heart. And I think that that's an important and valuable lesson for us to remember as well, because we're all about to be facing the worst system on the planet. And even in Christianity, there's so many different ideas and theologies out there. And if we don't pull together, this is just going to run us over like a freight train. And what are we going to all be doing while we're standing in line for the guillotine? Well, you need to convert over to be a Baptist. You hear me, bless God. Oh, I won't be a Pentecostal. You're a heathen. And when you get your head chopped off, you're going straight to hell for what you believed. I mean, come on, seriously? We really need to stand together is what we need to do, because this is a serious situation we're facing.
All right. Go ahead.
I had one last thought, and I saw a video recently. It was a 1940s. It was a woman who was charged criminally she was going to court, and it was for practicing medicine without a license. And she decided that she was going to take God's jurisdiction. And so she says, I take God's jurisdiction. I want you all to know I take God's jurisdiction. And they didn't know what to do with her. And they said, we're going to give you a lawyer. She says, no. And they brought in a different lawyer, and she said, no. And she says, I want to see the charges against me. I want to see what it is, the complaint against me. And she kept saying that I'm taking God's jurisdiction. And I found it really interesting. They ended up putting her case at the very end every single day. and emptying all the courtroom. So there was no other defendant that saw this. So there was no other lawyer that saw this. They brought in specialized lawyers. And so when you think we have a demonic order, which is evident, that demonic order, they know they're under God. They know they're under God. They know too that they are in God's jurisdiction. So at some point,
She froze again.
She'll be back, I think.
Yeah.
Or not.
Oh no.
Oh, well.
Usually she came back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If she doesn't come
All
back,
right. Well, we lost her.
I just want to
That's
say,
just
I
funny.
think I've heard, and you have to double check this for yourself, but I have heard that courthouses are in fact Masonic lodges.
I've heard something to that extent as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So maybe it's a
Lisa,
conspiracy theory, but people should look into that themselves. So sorry.
are you there?
yeah, I might be back. So when we take, if demons are subject to God and you take God's jurisdiction, consider that every power that has been erected around us, every law, every system has got us to this place. And so far, every single one of us has been looking for remedy. Oh, well, the FDA needs to do this. Oh, well, the courts need to, and the PrEP Act has to do this. And oh, well, this has to happen. We have to vote in this person. This is our savior. This, this political individual. We have to, right? All of the remedies are theirs. And they put everybody in place. And so I'm starting to envision this whole idea of what it looks like to say you're in God's jurisdiction, and to the demon order that's there. And so, yeah, I'm exploring that as a thought and conceiving of it, and we'll be writing on it. You can find me at lawyerlisa.substack.com and obviously get the book.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone. This has been an extended edition. A lot of fun, a lot to chew on. Everyone's links to their websites will be in the description. So I urge listeners to simply, one easy and free thing to do at the very least is to subscribe to everyone's channel, Substacks, YouTube's, X accounts, and we'll have the show notes as well. I'll go through the chat and we'll have a lengthy show notes as well, which will cover everything we've discussed. So thank you everyone for coming on Geopolitics and Empire.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.